Hi, so I'm about to begin part 3 of the King Jeongjo Cradle to Grave tour, but coronavirus is still with us, so before I go downtown and have to put my mask on, I want to explain that I'm not only going to show you places that are connected to King Jeongjo and Sado, but also parts of modern Seoul that I really like. Starting at subway Jongno Samga exit number 3. Yep. Because this is right near to everything that we're doing today. And also CNN recently said Jongno Samga was the 3rd most coolest place in the world, which made a lot of the expats and Koreans laugh because Jongno Samga is not the 3rd most coolest place in Seoul. But it is a cool place, so there's a lot here that I like. At night, the street is lined with pojangmaja, the cart restaurants, like these over here. They'll be all disassembled. Maybe we'll come back and show you. And it is really cool and a great way to experience Korean culture and cuisine. But I also want to show you these bikes over here because one good thing about Seoul now is that there are plenty of bike lanes. I've always been curious how easy it is to get one of these bikes. I heard that it's a lot simpler now than it was when the system started. If you don't live in Seoul, you're allowed as a non-member one use, and that's what I'm going to try today to see how easy it is to get that one use. I got the bike and it's pretty straightforward, although there's some parts that come out in Korean even though I pressed that I'm a foreigner and requested English. But I think it's easy enough to figure out. And we're going right down there to the main gate of Changdeokgung. But this road back there is a lot prettier because it's along Chongmyo Shrine, so we're going to go that way. So I'm heading to Changdeokgung Palace, and King Jeongjo became king in 1776 after his grandfather King Jeongjo died, and he moved from Changdeokgung to the main palace, Changdeokgung. And in 1795, from the main hall, the main gate, there was a huge procession. And that's what the subject of today's tour is about. So, that's my Korean partner, and I love this little shop because when I first came to Korea, restaurants were behind glass, and not only behind glass, but the glass was covered in all advertisements for what the restaurant sold. And now it's quite common to see cafes with street side seating, and I think this place hasn't opened up yet, so that's why there's no one there. This is the main gate of Changdeokgung, where King Jeongjo ruled from, and I love it because you can see the view of Bukhansan from here. Right by the main gate is another of these bike stations, and I thought there was a trail all the way to Gyeongbokgung, but it doesn't look like there is, but the sidewalk's long enough you can ride on it. The bike trail is iffy between those two palaces. You can see the mark on the road, so it seems like you're supposed to be riding on the sidewalk, but oftentimes the sidewalk is really crowded with people. And at this point, it actually picks up to a real bike trail. Much easier going now, and we're coming up on Gwanghwamun, the main gate of Gyeongbokgung. So you may wonder why Jeongjo didn't rule from Gyeongbokgung, and that's because it was burnt down. It had been destroyed in the late 16th century during the Japanese invasions. This is kind of interesting. I just remembered something when I passed this old street underpass. This used to be how tourists had to get to the palace if they were on foot during the time of the military dictatorships. And I think one of the reasons for that is because if you saw the big demonstrations, the candlelight demonstrations, they were all over here in front of the main palace in Jongno. And at the time of the student demonstrations and the military dictatorships, the students would storm places and I think they wanted the palace separated from the public. So they're all in this big street. So that way the students couldn't get in front of the palace, because even in Chosun times, students demonstrating in front of the palace had a strong significance about the level of contentment in the country. But now Korea is stable enough that you can see people can walk directly to the palace from the main square. And as I mentioned in part 2, there's a lot of reenactments. So this is the changing of the guard ceremony. And as you can hear, there are always demonstrations going on in this square, and it's being renovated to make it one large area that's connected to the Sejong Munhwa, like the Sejong Cultural Center. And that's King Sejong there. And if you remember from part 1, I talked about King Sejong and Lee Sun-shin, the admiral who protected Korea from the Japanese invasions of the 16th century. And those two, King Sejong and Lee Sun-shin, were about the only Chosun figures that were praised during the military dictatorship. So by locking this, we ended our bike rental, and it was mixed results because the bikes are great, but the bike trail doesn't always run, and we ran into some problems on the traffic. But I also wanted to show you why people demonstrate in front of Changdeokgung, even though the Chosun dynasty died in 1910. It's because the presidential residence, the Blue House, is right behind Changdeokgung. You can see its roof right there. So we dropped the bikes off at the start of Cheonggyecheon, the restored stream, which used to be an elevated expressway into the city when I first came to Korea. This stream is just city water. It's pumped up from the Han River, but as you can see, there's a lot of fish that live in the stream, and I hope that we can see some cranes. There's one down there, I see it now. So it's amazing that this city of 10 million has fish and cranes, its own little ecosystem. What I wanted to show you though is between that building, the one with the Jetsons architecture on top, the 1960s cartoon, American cartoon, to that black building. What? Suddenly it's Christmas, but this part needs to be done again because the video was bad. Yeah, as I mentioned, Cheonggyecheon was an elevated expressway when I first came to Korea. And like Cheonggyeokgung, it's a microcosm of modern Korean history. After the Korean War, it was banked by two long, thin shanty towns filled with North Korean refugees. A Korean friend who came from an upper middle class family told me that in 2005, during the opening of the restoration, she came with another friend of hers who's very wealthy, and she told her friend how when she was a girl in the 50s, she came here with her mother and asked her mother why all those people lived along the stream. And her mother told her it's because they were poor. And that's the first time she learned what the word poor meant in relation to people. And after she finished, her wealthy friend looked at her and said, that's where I grew up. And I love that story because it shows just how quickly Korea changes.
둥둥